All right, we should be live now. Nope, it still says waiting. All right, we're live.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Talking Stick Show. So, I'd like to welcome back the incredible co-host. We have Two Feathers Medicine, Laura Massey. Hello.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Dale. Hi, Nigel. Really great to be here again. Looking forward to this show.
Great to have you on again, sister. So, for this week's guest, we have Nigel Shaw. Welcome to the show, Nigel. Hello.
Thanks very much for having me. It's been a real pleasure finding out about you guys and hooking up with this live stream.
Thank you. So, a little bit of a backstory. So, I've been listening to Seventh Wave music, which is Nigel is part of, for quite a few years. I came across them on YouTube just out of looking through different things on the news, the feed on the side. All of a sudden, there was this winter solstice ceremony with the music as well. And as soon as I listened to it, it really connected to me. And I was listening for years, like literally maybe once a week, putting one of the tracks on or one of your performances on. So I've really stuck with the music, and it happened maybe about 4 months ago. I messaged Nigel, and he's been quite busy, but we finally got here. So yeah, welcome. So Nigel, so tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and what made you get into music.
Okay, so my name's Nigel Shaw. I live on Dartmoor, down in the southwest of England. I live right up on the top of the national park, in the middle of the national park. Um, for those who don't know Dartmoor, it's a pretty wild place for England. England's often the landscape is quite sort of tamed, but Dartmoor still has that feeling of real wildness to the landscape. Lots of waterfalls and forest and great tors made of granite, and also a lot of ancient remains. It's one of the richest places in Northern Europe for our ancestral remains. You know, stone circles, hut circles, stone rows. Dartmoor is covered in them. You literally have them everywhere, and they are all really easy to access. You know, everybody can go. So there's a feeling of real openness to the land. And I've been a musician um, pretty much most of my professional life, as well as, like all musicians, having done many other jobs to make a bit of money. Um, I started out in London. I moved down to Dartmoor 30 years ago, which is the best move I ever made to get out of the city. Um, and I was drawn to Dartmoor. I can't remember ever wanting to live anywhere else. And it's been the main inspiration for pretty much every bit of work I've done. The wild land, and the sounds of nature, and the spirits of the ancestors that inhabit this place.
So what made you want to get out of the hustle and bustle then? What was going on at that time where you decided, right, I'm going to come out of this busy place and I want to go move in the middle of nowhere, but everything at the same time?
Well, there's many reasons. I mean, obviously, the obvious one is that everything that was inspiring me was down here in the southwest of England. I mean, there's lots of beautiful parts of these lovely islands, but it was always this place that called. And I was writing music and creating music that was about the natural world. And it was really weird to come down to the southwest to record the streams and birdsong of Dartmoor, or to the ocean and record the Atlantic Ocean, and then go back to my little flat in London and play these sounds, and sort of still be kind of divorced from them, not to be, taking them in every day. And I wanted those sounds every day. I wanted the green around me every day. Um, I think, yeah, one of the last flats I lived in London, I think there was a kebab shop, a fish and chip shop, and a Chinese, all next to each other, right underneath the flat I lived in. And it was on a major roundabout, and the car alarms were ringing, and the smells were wafting up from downstairs. And so I put on these natural sounds that I'd recorded on in the wild, and used to just block out all of these sounds of London. But yeah, I've been trying to come down for years, but I couldn't find any Londoners to come with me.
Laura, I think there's a bit of an echo on your mic.
I'll turn it off when I'm not.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. Yeah, so you moved out of the hustle bustle, you came to Dartmoor. So what happened in your start of your Dartmoor journey then? Was it just you went there with the intention of setting up more music, setting up more workshop? What was the intention when you got to Dartmoor?
Yeah, I mean, it was really to take in these sounds and the energy of this land and take it in, as I said, every day, and to literally be able to go straight to the studio and create, so that you could walk and then create the same day. There was no lag. You could bring those energies straight into the recording process, so that you were really living it. You could even open your windows and the sound would come in. I mean, I remember an early recording of mine, and there was a buzzard calling outside the studio, and it literally perched, 20 yards away, and was doing this amazing eagle cry. And so I just opened the window and stuck the microphone out, and there was a buzzard on the track. And I think that I mean, I've been doing this sort of music. This is pretty much the only type of music I've ever done. I haven't kind of had another career in music that I've um, done and then turned it into this. So this was always what I've been doing. I think I remember coming down in a January, a wintry January on Dartmoor, and within I think the first few days I'd set up the studio, and I started recording instantly. And the first recording I did here was called The River, and The River, was probably one of my best known pieces of work. I would imagine it sold a lot of CDs and cassettes back in the day, and CDs. And it was literally my entrance into Dartmoor. Was this piece of music was literally just appeared in about 2 months.
So it's like you always constantly had that inspiration with nature, especially moving from the hustle and bustle to the nature. It's like every day that inspiration is there, and that kind of like fresh creativity is there all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to a friend the other day, and they said, "What am I doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm working on a new piece of music, and it's about Dartmoor." And they said, "What, another piece of about Dartmoor?" And I said, I could live here for lifetimes, and there would never not be music to write, because the land is always changing. There's always a new color, there's always a new sound, there's always something fresh and inspiring in the landscape. And there's not a day goes by that I'm not grateful for this, because I understand this is a great privilege for me to live here. And I don't take it for granted. I wake up every morning just sort of going, "Oh, how did this happen?"
So, Nigel, what's the difference between the natural sounds of Earth and the ones that you create with what you play, because they reflect the earth sounds and so on, and the modern sounds, not just in a city, but the modern music that we can create? Where would you see the difference? Because it's not quite the same, is it?
Wow, that's a huge question to ask a musician.
Yes, it is.
Good one, Laura.
Yeah, nice one. So, I mean, for me, I was never trained as a musician, so it's something I did because I just wanted to. I loved the idea of doing it, and I wanted to hear sounds that I couldn't hear in other music. That's not saying that I don't love lots of other music, but there was something that I couldn't hear, and I thought, well, the only way around this is to do it myself. And obviously, I've never managed to totally please myself with what I'm doing. I've worked on that we have in many types of music is there's so much happening. You're bombarded, like we are in our modern lives, with vast amounts of information, whether it's musical notes or texts or Instagram messages or whatever. And I think the thing about creating music that's inspired by the land is finding space within it. So you have these gaps and this this moment of a breath as you play. I know that the nature sounds react to my body. I can feel my body absolutely reacting, as everybody does, to the sounds of a river or bird song or wind through the trees, or these sounds. We know them because they're so ancient in us. They're hardwired into our very DNA. And I think that there's a lot of busyness in so many types of music. Beautiful classical music, but there's a lot happening usually. Modern music, I love it. I use a lot of modern instruments. I use synthesizers. I have some here as well. I use electronics. Don't have a problem with those, but it's usually an overload. So I think to peel back those layers and to find simplicity is maybe the key.
Yeah, I think one thing you're saying for me there is there's a sacredness too, that the ancient ones used and is carried down and held within the land, especially where you are, where there's not, big concrete blocks of flats and things put on it, covering it up. So I can see how natural sounds, well, we know they're very healing anyway. We know if we go camping and we hear owls and foxes and things at night, how good we feel when we're connected to those natural sounds.
Yeah, and when we think about our ancestors and their relationship with the land, it was a very different experience from ours, where we have it sometimes and then we don't have it. They were surrounded by this the whole time. They would have breathed it in. They would have known these sounds. They would have been a deep part of their core. So when they started to create music, they were creating music as a prayer to this land, to the birds, to the animals. The relationships were very strong and closely bound. And so the instruments they created were a direct reflection from this. And obviously the instruments themselves were made from the bones of the land, in some cases real bone, and wood, and whatever, hide from a deer. Or so these, they understood this. And I think that's part of the problem now, is that we have a big separation from this sort of ancient way of looking at music. I get a bit evangelical about this. We're taught when we're young that music is quite competitive. We make it very difficult for our children to take music as part of their lives, because it becomes a job and a chore. And the key is in what we do when we do music. We play. That's why it's playing music and not working music. So and our ancestors absolutely understood this, and everybody in an ancient tribal culture would have been a musician, a singer, a dancer, all of these things. And there's a lot of ancient cultures where they don't have a word for musician, because it was just being a human being. So everybody was.
It's like you're giving the land there and the ancestors a voice. And that's what happens when I listen to your music. It's like I'm listening to the ancient ones through the music, and all of the lands blended into many different bubbles of reality, and all of the songs and the storytellers and all of the things what happen within that land is kind of directed through the musical note. And that's how I feel anyway now when I listen to all your music.
Well, that's very lovely comments. Thank you. I'm glad that comes over. As a musician, you try and, create something that you believe is going to be a transmissible idea, and so when it does, it makes you really happy. So thank you for that. Yeah, I think that I work with, or have done and still do work with, tribal people from different parts of the world, and their attitude towards music is very different from our European or westernized culture view, where there's musicians and they're on a stage above everybody, and most people are, the case in point is so many concerts I perform, people come up and say, it was a lovely concert, thank you. It must be so wonderful to be musical. And I can't understand this, because I've bluffed my way through being a musician for sort of nearly 40 years. So, and I think it's just, you've got to find the right tool for the job. And we give our children violins and pianos and very high, loud recorders to play. I mean, we've all had these experiences when we were young, and playing for a while, and our parents are really enthusiastic, and then suddenly they're going, please stop playing. I mean, if you learn to play a violin, I mean, that's painful,
Trumpet is another one as well. When someone doesn't know how to do the trumpet, like...
I mean, you've got to remember that these are modern orchestral instruments made to be played in these vast places, concert halls. So they're made to be really loud. Most of the ancient instruments I have around me from many parts of the world, they're quite quiet, and usually nearly everybody could get a sound out of them. What, in 10 minutes? It's a key that unlocks not just musicality, but contact with the land and contact with our ancient people as well.
Yeah, I'm not really sure why we have recorders in schools instead of a smaller flute, because it sounds different. It's almost like I don't know. I don't want to say a deliberate attempt to come away from the flute to something else, but could equally have a flute instead of a recorder and have a far more pure sound, couldn't you? And less grating on the parents as well.
The point is that when children are really little and you give them an instrument like a drum or a flute or whatever, they'll make it as loud as it can be, and they'll just bash it or blow or whatever. But when children get to a certain age, when they start to get this self-consciousness and self-awareness about themselves, they too feel a bit shocked by the sounds they make. They retreat in, they become embarrassed about making the loud sound. And handing them something that's really loud and complicated and then telling them to learn to read music is an almost surefire way to make sure most of us today are not, or don't consider ourselves, musical.
And that's it. It's like, I remember instances at school where if your voice sounded different than someone else, someone like, oh, your voice isn't very nice, or that person's got a good voice and you don't, then throughout life you just give up on even trying to express yourself creatively through music because someone said that. And I remember that happened to me in art once. The teacher was just like, they grade you for 1 to 10 out of your art. And I remember my artwork was more like in the moment art, where I could create from my own expression instead of copying stuff. And that's where I was good at. But when I was trying to, draw something specifically, they were like, oh, I don't think you should be doing art, like taking it on for the next one. But then later on, I really loved art in that other way. So it does make sense of how the impressions are with the future generations at the moment is so important.
And they box all your expressions like that, don't they? I mean, why can't we give them like singing bowls instead of the triangle that you get to play? You're normally given that if you can't play anything else, aren't you? You stand there with the triangle.
I mean, you could see that this is actually, it's the beginning of, I mean, I'm not sort of, particularly into governmental control or anything like that. I believe we still have a lot of freedom. Well, in this country, we're lucky to have a relative amount. But there is an element of control with what happens with music, is that, that you can only do it this way, that it's only music if it's like this. And that's true, as you said, about art. You're talking about your experience of drawing and painting. I mean, it's where the most freedom should be in our creativity. That's where we should be at our freest, with the least, times that someone's leaning over your shoulder telling you you're doing it wrong. It's where the spirit can be most free in our creativity, and in anywhere in the world. And so that's why many cultures that try and suppress their people, they'll suppress the creativity. They'll take away the musical instruments. They won't let people sing. This is like the start of a point of not letting people dream and be free inside themselves. I mean, I have a very similar story to you, Dale. About the only time I ever tried to sort of officially do music, I was about 9, and the school I went to, they had music lessons, so I thought I'd like to play guitar. So my mum and dad very kindly got me a cheap nylon strung guitar, like a kid's one, And I went along to the lesson and I loved it. I had a great time, and they were telling me what to do, but I was just twanging the strings and having a good time. I think it was about the third or fourth lesson I went back to. And at the end of the lesson, the teacher turned around to me and he said, "I don't think there's any point in coming back, is there?" And I was like, what? I mean, as any little kid, I was just, really? But I'm having a really good time. Isn't that what music is? And he was like, he was searching for someone that he valued that would be worth teaching, that might be turned into some reflection of his own ability as a teacher. So,
Wow.
yeah, I think probably, I don't know how many people are listening to this tonight, but I can guarantee you that nearly most of you will have had some experience that's similar to this.
Yeah, expression and creativity, unfortunately, can be shut down in those ways, which is a bit sad. But I mean, people like you and us who are putting this out there so that we can bring back some of the indigenous teachings through music and through that expression, not just music in instruments, but of the voice as well, so that children can express and be taught some of the grandmother and the grandfather ways, which Dale and I are very into propagating, is their ways of sitting around a fire and telling stories and keeping it going generation after generation, because we're always saying we've lost those oral teachers and we've lost the music teachers like that. And we've lost in some ways the joy of expression of music with instruments in that sort of setting, and in a natural setting as well, rather than a recorder in your bedroom, actually as part of like celebration or ceremony or children together doing it, not just at the nativity play at the end of term.
Beautiful, Laura. Great words. And connecting back as well to competition, because this is, you mentioned it at the start, Nigel, and it's very true, because say like these things like Pop Idol or all those things on TV, it is all competition. It's like they're looking for the person who has the best voice, the best sounding, and they're going to do what they can to elevate them. So all these new generations are watching that and saying it's all about who's got the best voice. If I don't have the best voice, I have to give up, instead of allowing the raw creativity of maybe you're good with this instrument, maybe you're good with this, maybe you're good with rhythm with drum, allowing them to go into where they feel natural in their natural habitat, and allowing that to expression to come through. And like you're right, Laura, we have lost those oral teachers. And obviously, Nigel, you're one of them out there who's showing the way of producing that natural musical frequency through love, through passion, through life, not in an egotistical way, but in a loving frequency way to heal themselves.
Well, exactly. And it's really interesting, why, music and some other creative paths are viewed in this way. I mean, I when I've talked to people before about, expressing themselves like this, and they've almost had a look of fear in their eyes about being able to express in that way. And I've likened it to saying, well, look, do you feel that if there's some beautiful Shakespearean actors or wonderful, people with beautiful speaking voices who have a very eloquent way of talking and choose all the right words and everything's perfect. Does that mean I just don't speak anymore? Do I just become completely silent in my life and never say another word? So we don't have that competition in that. We talk and we chat and we do all the things that we do. And we're not worried about expressing ourselves as we are. But as soon as you put a musical instrument in someone's hand or the paintbrush, that person becomes incredibly self-aware. So there's been a fracture somewhere in this about this particular thing. But I think you should liken it to that. Why not? It's another voice. In fact, the Native American people have a beautiful expression for the flute, particularly. And they call it your second voice. So your first voice is your speaking voice and your singing voice and the voice you use every day. And your second voice is your flute voice. And it's a prayer voice, and it's a voice that says things that your first voice can never say, with greater depth and greater clarity and with more power and spirit. And I love this concept that you have these layers of voices that you can use in different situations.
Yeah, I think partly there's been a heart-mind disconnect, hasn't there? And part of Dale and I's teachings, just like the Native Americans as well, is the mind-heart connection, and sing from your heart, express from your heart-mind. And I'm sure that's what they do in playing the flute, because the flute is, I guess, it's a spiritual instrument, isn't it? I mean, it's a wind instrument, so spirit is wind. You know, so you're automatically, once you're connecting to spirit, you're connecting to your heart anyway. So how about hearing some, Dale? What do you think?
Yeah, we're going to do some towards the end. We're going to get him to another question. So the talking flute, that's it, isn't it? That's what the Native Americans call it as well, the talking flute, which is exactly what you're talking about, Nigel. Exactly the same concept there.
I mean, one of the things to bear in mind, I think, which is I think a really, really beautiful story that I put in as part of when I'm teaching people to make instruments, is how old they are. Because in being sort of incredibly ancient, they are something that we have carried for so long as human beings. And I mean, I did a lot of research and got quite nerdy and anarchy about flutes, a little bit too much for some people's taste. And I had found that, they'd found these bone flutes that were, sort of 15, 20,000 years old. I mean, these were ancient instruments. But about 15 years ago, in a cave in southern Germany, archaeologists were working at the front of this cave, and they dug up this beautiful, tiny, tiny goddess made from mammoth tusk, ivory. Incredibly beautiful, delicate little figurine. And so they continued to dig, and immediately next to her, there was a bone flute. It was broken in half, but it was immaculate. The rest of it was perfect. 5 holes, sort of about this long, made from the wing bone of a griffon vulture, so a big bird. And when they did a sort of 3D reproduction of this flute and played it, it was absolutely beautiful. The melodies and the sounds of it were incredible. And they ended up finding 9 different flutes in this area of caves, all made from different materials. And when they carbon dated them, they were over 40,000 years old. And if you have a context that modern humans arrived in Europe around about that time, or maybe 45, 50,000 years ago, we know they must have come bearing their flutes. And of course their drums, but we have no leftovers from that, but the bone had remained. And I feel it, taking this in as how they were so much part of our life when we were ancient people, gives this context of how important these things were. They weren't just randomly made. They weren't just knocked up in an afternoon. These were crafted, precious ceremonial instruments. And that shows you back then, in the early days of humans in Europe, that was so important to them. You don't put that effort into making something that's just a toy. So it's a lovely way of putting a context of how long we've had this tradition.
Beautiful. And it'd be good to see that, the people experimenting with many different flutes, like trying to get the one that works. This one is sounding a bit more, oh, this is a perfect one. Then they go show their friends and they start, it would be lovely to see people doing that.
Well, I think the wonderful thing, for me as a flute maker, the wonderful thing is exactly what you're saying, is that, I make wood, I use wood from Dartmoor, from my land, and around Dartmoor, to make my flutes specifically. I don't use wood from anywhere else. But obviously I get fascinated by, this wood makes this sound, or this tree makes, has this spirit, this one has, and I can imagine it's exactly the same. These ancient people are saying, well, a mammoth bone sounds amazing. Have you ever made one from, this other material? And they're the same as us. So they would have had the same feeling of searching for beauty and searching for power and spirit. They would have done the same journey.
Laura, did you have a question before
No, I was just alluding to what Nigel was saying, really, about the made from the different natural materials and therefore carrying those energies the beautiful layering of the energies of whatever animal or tree or whatever it came from. So what sort of trees would you have on Dartmoor? I'm guessing oak.
Yeah, we have beautiful oak forest on Dartmoor. You know, this sort of what they're now terminizing as rainforest, and it's hanging with lichen and mosses, and the oaks grow in the lower valleys on Dartmoor. So higher up where we are, we have the willow and rowan, some ash, hawthorn, these sort of trees. They all have a song. I mean, every single one of these trees, and not just the variety of tree, but each individual tree as an individual being in its own right, has a voice that when you're lucky enough to use the body of this tree, you can sing its song again, and you can bring it back, its voice, how its leaves used to sound in the wind when the wind blew through them, or hollow in the trunk. The story within each of those trees will become the sound of your instrument and the spirit of your instrument as you play it. There's no such thing as a bad wood, by the way. Yes. They're all beautiful.
So say you're going and searching for the wood for the flute. What are some of the things going on in you that day when you're about to say, right, I'm going to make this flute? For those listening, what's some of the preparation you have for making that flute?
So if I'm making a flute for myself, I'll usually have it's like a song search. You have the sounds, you have maybe not the whole composition or the whole piece, but you'll have a feeling of what you're wanting to express within that piece of music. Choosing the wood is then sort of that moment where you're gifted whatever it is you need to be able to produce that song. If I'm gathering wood myself, then it's quite a long process, because you'll go to a piece of forestry, maybe they've been felling some trees. We have many trees on our land and we lose them in storms, or a limb will come down. I think the collection process is always the gratitude. You're taking something from the land, and your job is to honor it all the way through the whole process. As I say, it does take quite a long time, because then the wood needs to be seasoned. So sometimes it's a year later or more, sometimes, before that voice will come from the flute again. So I think it needs to be a really mindful thing. I have sometimes been to a friend who's gone to a sort of regular wood yard, and it's really sad in a way. The wood feels like the song is long gone. I'm sure it isn't. I'm sure you can find something deep in there, but I think knowing the piece of land it came from is crucial. In that process. However, I will say that for some very special woods, I have a friend who's a Dartmoor farmer, who lives about 15 minutes away, who has a big sawmill. And when I met him 25 years ago, I think, I had long-haired hippie, and he used to really find it fascinating that this strange guy turning up wanting flute wood, but he was also fascinated by it. He just found it really strange and different, what I was doing. He's now one of my closest friends, and he will call me sometimes and say, I've got something really, really special, and you need to come and collect it. I think you'll like this. So he understands now, but he also does charge me plenty of money too. He's a Dartmoor farmer. He knows where the money's going to come from. So
have you ever got any wood from Wistman's wood?
No, I haven't. Wistman's wood is kind of very protected, as it should be, because it is sort of like the last remnants of a very, very ancient woodland that would have been up all the valleys on Dartmoor, which there's wood in the lower Dart, but the top of the moors, they're very beautiful, but they are fairly treeless. But all those valleys even going right quite high up the moor, would have had Oak Valley trees, more like Wisman's Wood, these stunted oaks twisted by the weather and, sort of growing out of boulders, with virtually no soil. So anything that falls in Wisman's Wood, you leave, because that is food for all the generations of oaks that hopefully will still keep growing in this very special sacred place. So what I have done is don't tell the national park, but I have taken some acorns and I've planted them, and I have Wisman's Wood oaks growing on my farm.
Oh, wow. That's a good idea. I didn't think of doing that when I was there. That's amazing.
A lot of people,
you have to be quiet about
that. Yes. Have you played in Wisman's Wood?
Yeah. Quite often. It's I mean, it's the memory and ancientness of that particular. I think the problem is now with Wisman's Wood is it's so well known that you would need to go there like the other night, with a full moon, no people, just the moon and the trees, because the rest of the time it is quite a busy place now. Most of the year it's very visited. But yeah, it's incredible. It's beautiful.
And the standing stones, how is your music with the stones? Can you feel the interaction when you play either within the stone circle or
incredible. I think that one of the lovely things about Dartmoor is it, as in other special places that still have that ancientness, is that veil is very thin, between all the ages that are past. So the stone circles and the rows and the hut circles, particularly for me, are the places where you touch into something so much more easily, because it just feels such an open place for memory and honoring. And the history of the incredible ceremonies and extraordinary history of human interaction with the landscape. So I have definitely my favorite places to go. But we also on the farm here we recreated a Neolithic sort of stroke Bronze Age roundhouse on our land.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, so this is kind of built from granite and oak and thatch, and it's the sort of size of the largest of the ancient buildings of Dartmoor that I kind of went and looked at for many years. We built it about 25 years ago now, and I've recorded a whole music album in this space. We've had visitors from so many ancient cultures around the world come and do prayers and make offerings in this building as well. And it's another way of recreating a space, but it immediately, with this central fire, draws the ancestors into it. So many times we've had people say, it feels really busy inside, even when there's no people, because it's like a hearth fire that the ancestors naturally gather around. So it's been a real center point of so much of our work here on the land, is to create this sort of recreated ritual landscape. We've built stone rows and burial places and things like that, all on the farm. So in miniature, we've created a space that people can come here and be part of that ancient remembering.
So let's talk about the seventh wave. How did that come about, and you working on that? Was that a long time ago that came about, seventh wave music?
Yeah, now I can be a proper old chap and talk about back in the day.
Back in the day.
Back in the day. So I produced my first sort of ambient album. It was all electronic. There was no acoustic instruments in it, but it was completely relatable to what I do now, in 1985. So a good long time ago. And I did a few recordings, and the first things I ever did were on cassette only. Everybody remember cassette?
Yes. And when the cassette strip came out, and you had to
get
reel
the
it
pen
back
and
in.
wind. You'd end up with strings of it, you know. But it was a cheap way of being able to produce music as a you know, you know, trying to become a musician, really. And I think at the time, I didn't really think about it, but there really wasn't very much music being made specifically for this purpose of being, I mean, there was ambient music, but there wasn't really a huge amount of music that had some kind of spiritual element or message within what you were trying to do with the music. It was quite an unusual thing to do at the time, and consequently, nobody would sell it for me. Nobody would play it on the radio. Nobody was even slightly interested in it. I mean, the concerts were very successful from the early days, but it was quite hard, you know, to make a living from doing this. And I just, you know, I had a few disappointing meetings with record companies, which in hindsight was the best thing that could have possibly happened. And so I set up my own label. And so Seventh Wave Music, I mean, I called it Seventh Wave because I was doing quite a bit of surfing down in Cornwall at the time. And there's a sort of mythological surfing idea that every seventh wave goes further up the beach. So it's a sort of bigger wave, if you like. So that was part of, you know, my thinking. And I've been an independent musician ever since. You know, I've never sold my music through record labels. We've done everything ourselves. And now it's concerts, it's workshops, it's books, and lots of different things that all, you know, came under the umbrella of this original idea. So much like my youth, I kept a punk ethic to do it all yourself. And it's been lovely. You know, I've been in control of my work. I've been able to, you know, not sell it out, you know, not to monetize it in the same way, and to, you know, be able to do whatever I wanted to do creatively, and that is you know, that is not easy. You know, in music world, you know, there was one record label slightly interested in what I was doing, and they said, yeah, well, we like this album, so maybe, but this track is particularly good on it, so maybe you could do a whole album like that track. And I said,
oh no,
I don't write like that. I mean, you know, I couldn't do it even if I wanted to. So I think, you know, I've been very lucky.
Oh God.
Oh.
Sorry.
Going on and off. So yeah, so Seventh Wave was set up as this umbrella record label, and now more, to sort of encompass this sort of work, and for us to be able to create freely within that sort of space, really.
Beautiful. And so you're still regularly doing those concerts, the live ones, because I really want to go to the next one. When is the next one you're doing?
Well, I do lots of different, I do other types of music. So I do my solo flute concerts.
Yes.
I work with my partner, Carolyn Hillier, who's a writer and singer and artist, and, you know, whose work is really well known in the field of women's music and women's workshops, and sort of using ancient language and things in her work. And I also play in a dance music band.
Oh, wow.
Taking the ancient instruments and making it much more kind of groovy and energized,
Yes.
working with other musicians. So I'm actually doing a New Year's Eve party doing that, locally on Dartmoor in Ashburton, which is a celebration. But we will put out a full program in January of concerts for next year. We do a lot of festivals, you know, Glastonbury Festival and Green Gatherings, a beautiful alternative festival down in Chepstow. We'll do lots of concerts in beautiful places. I think the next time up near where you are, I think we're looking at booking to come to Hebden Bridge.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's not far at all.
Yeah, I know. So I thought I'll let you know when that is.
I'll be there.
Yeah. So, you know, we play Glastonbury quite often. We have lots of, you know, friends and support in Glastonbury, and obviously on Dartmoor, here on the land itself. We welcome people to do workshops and to do concerts here. So people can come and check out the website, and there's in January there'll be a growing list of places where you can come and say hello to us.
And we'll put all the links as well for those listening. We'll put all the links connected to the show as well, to have a look and take a look at the library of music. There's so much out there. So a question, Nigel, for you would be, so for those kind of like lacking creativity in the music industry, wanting to kind of like find their own rhythm, have you got any words of advice for people who kind of, because you've done it for so long, and it's beautiful to see your discipline to the self and your continuing journey for how long you've done it, and the inspiration just keeps coming. It's like, so what would be your advice for people out there who lack that drive to continue and find that inspiration?
Well, it's very interesting, isn't it? Because, music itself, I mean, more than maybe many other creative things, has changed so remarkably, over the time I've been doing it. The digitalization of music has both been amazing, but also, quite challenging as well. The beautiful thing about being able to create music at the moment is that you can have, a computer at home, and you can make an album that sounds pretty much as good as you could make anywhere. If you buy some nice microphones, you can, in your front room, you can record an amazing piece of work. The digital nature of downloads and streaming means that you can get it out to more people than I ever could, when I first started, where you had to physically go somewhere and deliver, either do concerts or deliver cassettes and CDs to shops. So I think that side of it is really positive for people. The negative side of it is twofold. Is one, that there's so much out there, how do people find you and what you're doing? And also that there's no money now, because the streaming services don't pay musicians anything. Basically it devalues the value of what music is. Every time someone streams a song, the artist gets, sorry, this is a bit of a moan for artists.
Go ahead.
But it is the truth, basically.
Yes.
If you are not a live musician, you're talking about 0.0001 pence every time your song is played. It takes a lot of streams to be able to make a living from that. So, and I know I've talked to younger musicians, and this is a challenge. However, taking your music live is the key. And I've always loved the connection with other human beings, of being in a room and standing up and going, okay, this is me, and all the fear that entails. And, but then, that two-way thing that happens. I think the main thing is that people often set a sort of time limit. If I haven't done this by this time, then I'll just give it up. And I think the thing that I learned most when younger, that may still be applicable today, is to just keep believing in what you do, and find the people who who will have the same feeling as you. Find those roots where people, the like minds, will be there to receive what you do with your creativity. Because when you do, the openness of that exchange is incredibly beautiful. And it may not be the most financially rewarding thing, but it will be when you talk to like minds and you meet people who share your love of whatever it is that you're trying to do with your work. And don't compromise. Just be yourself. Just be your voice, your individuality, your spark that can't be done by anyone else. It's only you and your voice and your song or whatever.
I guess I'm finding really sort of what you're alluding to is like a soul family, your musical soul family, or your mode of expression soul family. And when you get together to do something like that, the energies and the potency that comes from that can be really hugely healing, can't it?
Yeah, and I think also about being, really honest in your expression. It's like, play yourself, play your heart into what you do. Because in my experience is that people absolutely know the difference. People who say they're not musical or don't know, understand that sort of stuff, will absolutely know the difference between someone, doesn't matter whether they're, the best player of music in the world, but if they're being very honest to you in delivering what they're doing is that people really respond to that in a way that they wouldn't with a sort of incredible, virtuosity, like a master player, but with no spirit. It's like, the skill of musicianship is really about the honesty of it. And you can do the simplest thing, clearly and honestly with your open heart, and people will recognize it, and they will respond likewise, in the same way.
And that feels like what mainstream's missing at the moment is that connection from the heart to the throat, where you get a musician who's in that flow of full love for themselves, having fun, literally expressing themselves, and you can feel it through the rhythm of the music. While you've got a lot of mainstream where they get these co-writers in who write for them, and they end up singing just a song and repeating it, and there's just not that heart-based action in it. It's just, it might sound good, but you can feel the difference when someone is actually singing from experience and singing from that true heart, like you say, that heart note.
And we heal ourselves that way, don't we? I mean, we can help heal ourselves through expression like that of singing and music and sound.
Absolutely. I mean, we with music, we have a chance to open up a channel of communication that goes beyond, the spoken word. I mean, we're going back to the second voice flutes. The expression of music can transmit a very deep layer of, incredibly subtle but powerful, communication with another human being. And it's, I mean, we all know what music does for us. How it makes us feel, how it makes us react, and it's sort of something never to be underestimated. I think it's a deeply profound thing, to do.
So for your teachings, then, what do you offer for people? You say you do some teaching as well. What does that entail?
Okay, so I'm just gonna. So I mean, I started flute making because I wanted, I'd bought a Native American flute from an amazing guy in Los Angeles many years ago, and I bought a few more flutes from him, and then, without saying anything to him, he's a Native American guy in the Southwest states, and without saying anything to him, I thought, I need wood from my land. So I went to a friend who had, proper skills, because I didn't know how to do any woodworking, and together we made our first flutes, and incredibly it played. I mean, I as I say, the last thing I'd made was probably something for my mum when I was about 12 or something in woodwork class. So to hold this instrument that I'd made, and it sounded like an instrument. I mean, the tuning was very interesting, but the sound was very beautiful. And I started to make quite a few flutes for myself like this. And then I spoke to my friend. So this guy's name is Guillermo Martinez. He's a native Tarascan guy. And I said to him, look, I've started making my own flutes, and I just wanted to talk to you because, there's issues here. I've taken a sacred instrument of Native American people, and, I'm kind of starting to, make my own instruments, and I just want to see what you feel. And his expression, I mean, he said very clearly, I don't speak for all Native American people. But he said, for me, the more people making and playing these instruments in the world, how can the world not be a better place? It's incredibly generous, huge gift, very simply and not offhand, but, just handed over like that, of just saying, this is about the world and about, contacting the spirit of anybody who will listen. And he said, but better than that, he said, I'm going to come over and I'm going to teach you Brits how to make flutes. So Guillermo came over the next year, and we did our first ever flute making workshop on Dartmoor. As far as I know, it's the first group of, large group of people being taught flute making anywhere in the UK. We made, I can't remember, was it 14 beautiful cedarwood flutes in one weekend, and drums. We did drums as well. It's a busy weekend. And then he came back the second year, and we made more instruments. And as he left, he said, well, I think you can do this now, don't you? So I don't need to travel all the way from LA to to Dartmoor to do this. So ever since then, I've been teaching flute making. I do 2 classes a year in May and September, and people make a flute that looks like this. So this is a classic Native American, or more specifically, probably a Lakota flute, because there's many types of Native American flute, and this is just one of them, but it's the best known one. Traditionally made of cedar wood, traditionally just with one pipe, like this, one barrel. Traditionally not like this, because this has 7 holes, most of them had 6. And they just have the most beautiful, soft, gentle, mellow sound. And when people come here, I'd say the majority of people not only don't play a musical instrument of any kind, but have never made anything out of wood. So they often come looking again, kind of scared by the idea. But all the instruments made are beautiful, and they all have the song of the maker and the wood built into them. And it's probably one of the most joyful and unexpected things I've ever done. I never thought I would know anything worth teaching. So it's been a joy. So, it's become something that's really important to me to keep passing on this, this line from 40,000 years ago with the bone flutes. We're still passing on flute making to the next load of people, and the next load, and the next load. This lineage is incredible. And a huge thank you to Guillermo, my lovely friend, who is coming over to the UK next year, in August next year. And we'll be doing teaching, and he's going to teach some of his ceremonial work here on Dartmoor next year in August. So you could get a chance to come and meet him. He's a very big bear of a man.
We know a lot of bears. Got many friends.
Yeah, but you can see him. He's got a wonderful Instagram channel where he talks about all sorts of Native American sacred instruments and teaches the traditions and how to play them, and he's got a website and stuff like that. So I can maybe send you those. But I think if you look up he's actually sort of from the Mayan descent, actually, more than anything else, and his name of his flutes are Quetzalcoatl flutes. So you can, which is some mad spelling in Mexican, Quetzle, Quetzal flutes. Anyway, Guillermo Martinez, if you put that into any good search engine, you'll get lots of things about him. It's well worth checking out. He's a lovely man.
Beautiful. Have you heard of the Kokopelli before, Nigel? Yes, and that is ancient stories about the Kokopelli and the flute and the seeding of the reality and fertility and everything.
Yeah, there's actually wonderful, in every tradition has beautiful flute stories. I mean, you have Krishna, the playing, the flute player, and there's also amazing creation stories with that very ancient cultures, right through from Siberia to the northern tribes of Europe, of flutes being part of the creative thing, and whistles and things that are sort of built into these myths and traditions of the land.
Beautiful. So we're at the top of the hour now. So Nigel's going to be playing some music for us, which excited for this. So just sitting back, relaxing.
So I just needed to check in there, Dale. I mean, what timing are we at? Because I've got
so we've got a good half an hour for the rest of the show.
Okay.
And that's
I won't play for half an hour, but I'll play.
No, for as long as you want. Then obviously we'll talk after and continue. I just thought it's a great, after you've been talking about teaching it, to give us a bit of a performance there.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you. I will do a little introduction about each of the pieces I'm going to play you, just so that it gives you some context of these instruments. You may well have seen these before, but they're all really beautiful. And I think because we were finishing on talking about Native American flutes, I'll start with one. This is a drone flute. So this has 2 barrels, as you can see. This one is made from Dartmoor walnut. So we do occasionally get a walnut tree on the edge of the Dartmoor, but this is particularly special because it is not from any part of the tree that was above ground. It was made from the roots of the tree. So this is kind of like an underground flute. It was made for someone else and somehow came back to me, which is another magical story. So this is the walnut root flute.
Wow, that's beautiful.
I hope that sounds okay.
Incredible. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so earlier talking to you guys, I talked about bone flutes, and I'm going to play some for you now because they have a very particular ancient sound. You know, they talk about that ancient cave 40,000 years ago, where these flutes were played in this ritual and ceremonial space. I have two flutes, bone flutes, I'm going to play. The first is an eagle bone whistle. So this is just a single call, only used in sacred ceremony. And I'm going to play this. This is a red deer leg bone. So this is from Dartmoor, and the end is filled with wax from bees. So it will then continue this piece of music. It's kind of like a Dartmoor dreaming journey into a piece of music using a Slovakian overtone flute called a fujara. This is a mountain instrument played by the herding people who live up in the Carpathian Mountains in Central Europe. And their tradition goes back many hundreds, well, 1,000 years, playing this ancient instrument in the summer pastures up in the mountains. So this is a sort of Dartmoor journey. I've got some bird song that's going to start this off.
Wow. And Nigel. Oh, no, I don't. Wow.
That was beautiful.
So maybe I'll just do one more piece.
Yeah.
Does that sound
Yeah.
okay?
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah,
So the
fabulous.
evening
Thank
in the studio means I could be, if I close my eyes too long, I might just end up playing for 2 or 3 hours. So stop me, please do.
And so for those listening as well, I've put the website in the chat as well, so it is available to have a look at all the music and the up and coming events and everything. So it's seventhwavemusic.co.uk for those listening out there. It'll be in the description as well. Yeah, thank you, Nigel.
So I'm just going to play one more piece, which is a little bit different from the sort of these improvised pieces that I've been doing. This is a little bit more of a structured piece of music that I recorded a few years ago, called Dartmoor Symphony. And I work with a local small chamber orchestra. But as you can see, they're not here today. So I've got them in a small box. But basically, it's a different way of writing music where you are working much more in a composed and structured way of trying to put over particular sort of ideas and themes. And the symphony was based on the elements of the moor, and stone and wood and water and the sky and the air. And I'm just going to play, it's a very long piece of music, so I'm just going to play a small section of this. This is the opening in the first part, and it's a piece called Stone. And I'd just like to offer it to all those who are listening and to yourselves and to say thank you for welcoming me here. Yeah, this is very Dartmoor-y. This is a piece called Stone.
Incredible.
Wow.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Did that sound
Thank
okay?
you, Nigel.
Yeah, that sounded perfect. We had Amy as well. As you're playing one of the songs, a hawk landed on her bird table in the chat. Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Brilliant.
Made me quite emotional. It was so beautiful. Thank you, Nigel.
Wow. I'm in such a different space now.
It's so healing, isn't it?
Yes.
Me too. I mean, I've never been a very good disciplinarian about, meditation or, doing kind of anything strict or with any kind of order. But every time I can step into a space of having music, is the deepest place I know. From just a purely personal thing for me. It does all the things that I struggled to do in a more controlled way, and I've been incredibly lucky to do this as a journey.
And you can see it, you can feel it as well, like the uniqueness of your music and the joy and the expression of yourself is just coming through it. Like you can really feel it is talking. It's like you're talking, the talking flute.
Well, actually,
Yeah,
sort of interviews are kind of a rarer thing for me because so Carolyn, my partner, is a word expert. She can just place and the way she frames things and everything, and I always have a great regard for it. So usually I let her do most of the talking and I do the playing. So I feel I've talked a lot tonight.
Yes, and it's
been nice to play something too.
Yes, and it'd be great at some point to come down and see you and experience it live. And yeah, thank you so much for coming on the show. And so how can people get a hold of your music and everything?
So like when I was talking a bit earlier, that the music's all available from our website, and we are digital enough to do downloads and CDs. I still love CDs because I think you can really create with them and do beautiful artwork and put lots of messages inside and positive things. But people can get our work through our website, and access all the information about the concerts there as well. So come and visit us and send us a message and say hello.
Yes, I definitely will. And yeah, thank you for coming on. It's been real fun. Laura, have you got anything to say?
Just thank you so much. That was just absolutely beautiful. And the peace that you hold, you can hear it in your voice. And that is such a beautiful thing. And it comes out in your music too. So it's been a real honour to have you on the show. And I want to come on that workshop. I want to come and make a flute.
I'll join you, Laura. Let's go.
Yeah, we'll do that. Yeah, we'll be there.
Start more and make some of your own beautiful flutes.
Yeah. We'd love to. Yeah, it's been a real honour to have you on the Talking Stick show. Thank you so much, Nigel.
Pleasure. Thanks very much. And again, thanks so much for the invite. It was a really lovely thing to come and do. So thank you. And thank you for your patience and persisting in contacting me, Dale.
It felt like it was the right time. Like being Laura had quite a beautiful weekend doing medicine, and to come after this, to come straight back to this, it couldn't have been better. The timing of it, like, exceptional. So yeah, thank you, and thank you for everyone watching as well. And go take a look at the Seventh Wave website, which is seventhwavemusic.co.uk. I'll put it in the description as well. Also look at the YouTube. There's a lot of YouTube videos of live concerts as well. For those listening, please hit the subscribe button and comment. We appreciate your feedback, and I'll see you next week. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye. Bye, Nigel. Thank you.